All right, folks, hello and welcome back to online English class. I hope you guys are doing well. Today, we're going to continue the process of preparing for your exam, which is on May 13th, Wednesday of next week. Before we get into that process, let's go ahead and reorient ourselves to the top of the week announcements. First and foremost, make sure that you are on a daily basis accomplishing your discussion grade procedure. Second, make sure that throughout the course of this week and next week that you are preparing for the AP exam actively, all right? That you are studying for this exam by all of the methods that were described to you in the expanding your knowledge section of the review guide, all right? You can use any of these resources, and I would encourage you to interact with any and all of them on a daily basis, all right? Do not obsessively study literary terms, although you should have a functioning understanding of definitely the basic ones and some of the more sophisticated and obtuse ones in order to have those ready at hand whenever you approach the prompt. You never know what kind of prompt it's going to be. It might be one that you have a difficult time making heads or tails of, something that you're going to have to really struggle through. It might be something that is right down your alley and you understand you understand in a deep way the first time you read it. You never know, so it's useful to have as many of those literary terms ready at hand as possible. Okay, so for you AP students, you guys should have engaged in the process of reading some of this background information, right? The 2020 AP testing guide, the 2020 AP exam day checklist, the testing demo, all that stuff should have been engaged with by you. To kind of summarize that, right? Let's quickly just work through this information on this web page on the College Board, okay? So first and foremost, the exam is on May 13th for AP Literature, and it will be held at 2 p.m. On the exam day, you'll click on the link in your e-ticket 30 minutes before the start time for your exam, okay? It would seem that the start time is 2 p.m., so you need to log on 30 minutes prior to that start time and fill in some information. All right, a timer is going to show how much time remains until the start of the exam. So you'll need to make sure that you fill out that information, and then whenever that timer, when the time expires, the exam question is going to automatically appear, and you can begin. Okay, the timer is going to show 50 minutes. All right, and you should take 45 minutes to read the question and then construct your response, and then 5 minutes to submit that response. All right, when the timer gets to 5 minutes, an alert will show. You should stop working, they say, at that time and begin submitting your response. All right. So you need to have your e-ticket email, all right, which will be emailed to you by the College Board. You need to have completed your AP day checklist or AP exam day checklist. You need to have some kind of device that you can take this on that's connected to some kind of browser that you can get connected to the exam prompt on, and you need to in whatever way you want. Develop your response, and then you can copy and paste that response into the website. You can type it directly on the website if my impression of the situation is correct. You can handwrite it and then upload pictures of your response. I wouldn't recommend that. Okay, unless you are just desperately terrible at typing. Okay, but another note for you is that you are permitted to have class notes and study guides at your disposal, textbooks and other classroom resources at your disposal during the exam. Now, that is a little bit deceptive because probably the worst thing that you could possibly do is start flipping through your textbook and class notes while this clock is ticking. Okay, you need to be actively constructing and writing your response during the entire course of this exam. All right, so to basically make cheating impossible, right? The College Board is just said, well, you can just have access to whatever you want, but it's a bit of a trap, okay, if you do not use them wisely. Sure, you could look up a term or how to spell a word that you didn't know how to spell, right? Some lit term that you remember, but you're not exactly, exactly what it is, and you need to figure out what it is and look it up. Okay, you might look up a concept, maybe, but ultimately, if you're thumbing through your textbook during the course of this exam, you are going to be royally screwed, okay? So your prose fiction analysis is the whole exam. It's going to be 500 to 700 words that require you to construct it according to these basic compositional standards, which we'll talk about later. And ultimately, right, it's going to be at 2 o'clock on May 13th. And you need to make sure that you are logging in 30 minutes prior to that exam start. Okay, everyone clear with that? Everyone good on that? That should be pretty straightforward. You should have already worked through the testing demo. It should be self-evident how this is going to work. All right, so we're good to go. Contextualizing this is your continued work on the quarter 4 essay and your MWE for the road. If you're in the honors English 4 class, you don't need to be worrying about these review sessions. You just simply need to be downloading that prompt and working through your quarter 4 essay, making sure that you're writing the best essay that you've ever written. Okay? Pay attention to the focus points. All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to have a little more hands-on day where we're going to look at concrete examples of the ways in which some of the concepts that we discussed yesterday, like the function of character, the function of setting, the function of structure, the function of narration and narrative voice, and the function of figure language, actually iterate themselves in a text, in an actual prompt, and develop meaning. Okay, so what I'd like for you to do is Google the 2007 AP English Literature and Composition free response questions. All right, track those down. Pause the video as you do that and make sure that your screen, whatever device that you have access to, that you have this prompt pulled up in front of you. Okay, so do that now. All right, so you should have that pulled up. Hopefully you paused the video and pulled that up. Now, the next thing that I would like for you to do when I tell you to do so is to read the passage in its entirety, all right? So together, I'm going to read this prompt, okay, the task. Okay, so the task tells you to read carefully the following passage from this novel by this writer that you probably haven't heard of. Okay, then I want you to write a well-organized essay in which you analyze, okay, in other words, break down and describe how Trumbo uses techniques, literary techniques, like point of view, selection of detail, and syntax. Again, those are just examples. That is not at all constrictive. You don't have to use those three. You don't have to write a paragraph about each one. They're just examples, gestures in perhaps the right direction. You can discuss techniques such as those to characterize the relationship between the young man and his father. Okay, so in other words, at the core of this prompt is an interpretive claim. They want you to describe how Trumbo characterizes the relationship between this person and this person, a young man and his father. Okay, so take a moment and read through this passage independently. Please don't skip on this. Do it. All right, pause the video and read through the entire passage. Okay, so you should have read through the entire passage, and we're going to go ahead and begin the process of analyzing it. Okay, so now that you've read through the entire passage, you should be able to or prepared to write a kind of interpretive response. Now, this is a really important portion of the interpretive process because your interpretations of the specific textual detail need to be connected to this larger central claim. This is kind of this is a difficult task. Now, always remember this. If you cannot come up with a concise, meaningful interpretation prior to writing your analysis, you can also just begin analyzing the text. Start with a vague, lame statement that I would hate and wouldn't get you your point for a thesis statement. And then begin analyzing. Analyze that text carefully. Interrogate it, ask it what it means, comment on it, think about it, and then when you get to the end, your conclusion, you can build to a thesis. All right, so you can work from a thesis or build to a thesis on these prompts. Definitely remember that, all right? So after I've analyzed this text, I've got this thesis response that summarizes my reading of the relationship between the young man and his father. And it's not complicated, all right? It's not something that requires a PhD in philosophy or literary studies to understand, okay? Or psychology to understand. It's just about a very basic experience between a young man and his father, a 15-year-old boy who is increasingly experiencing a draw towards independence. In fact, my father and I had very similar experiences to this. I love this passage. It's very elegant. Okay, so I state that Trumbo characterizes, or Trumbo's characterization of the boy and his father suggests that the boy who is on the cusp of coming of age, who is on the cusp of becoming a man, right? He's 15, he's in adolescence, he's moving away from childhood and into adulthood. That much is obvious, right? Loves and respects his father. Okay, he definitely has affection for his father, and he definitely respects his father. Yet, simultaneously finds himself drawn toward increasing independence from his father's leadership as he approaches manhood. Okay, so this is a very normal experience, right? When you're 5 years old, you're not really as interested in having friends, peer friends, right? You want to just hang out with your mom and your dad, and watch Pixar movies. Well, as you get further into adolescence, there's an increasing draw to have friends and to spend time with people of your own age. It's a way of asserting your own independence. It's a way of being apart from adult supervision. Okay, which oftentimes can lead to mischievous and bad activity, but also is a natural process in the ultimate in the ultimate coming of age experience, which is leaving the care of your parents and beginning the process of caring for your own kinds of children. Right. So this kid, this boy, all right, is in the midst of that process, right? That much is pretty clear, right? This natural process of maturation, which the boy suspects will be misunderstood as disloyalty or ingratitude, right? The boy is not like, shouting it from the rooftops that he wants to hang out with someone other than his dad. He's a bit afraid. He's got some anxiety, right? He suspects that perhaps his dad is going to look at him and go, "You ungrateful little dweeb. I raised you. No, you're not going fishing with Bill Harper, that punk. You're coming with me, right? That's why I'm up here. That's why I brought you up here, right? Okay, you go fishing with me. I'm your dad. Don't you love me? Aren't you loyal to me? Right? This suspicion creates a kind of anxiety in the boy. But that anxiety in the back half of the passage is resolved by the father's blessing of his son. Right? He gives him this sort of precious object, his fishing rod. Okay, and the boy, the son, takes that, and he is blessed. His increasing independence is blessed by his father, and his father does so in this act of sacrificial love. Of course, the father would have preferred to hang out with his son. That's why he's there. That's what fathers like to do, right? It's kind of rough to watch your kids age. Okay, I've had this conversation with my own dad many times, especially in my adolescence and in my early 20s, as I was just increasingly living apart from intimate relationship with my dad, and I needed him to know, and he also needed me to know that that was okay, right? That was part of what it meant to grow old, to become a man. All right, this scene just simply dramatizes that. Okay, so how does Trumbo develop that impression by using literary techniques? Well, I want to talk through a couple examples. All right, if we look here in the first paragraph is devoted to describing the setting of the scene. All right, and the setting of the scene helps mirror or imitate the kind of coming of age experience, the kind of precipice that you guys know what the word precipice means, right? It's like a peak. It's like a highest point. It's like a point of rising and also of falling. Okay, the relationship between the son and the father reaches a kind of precipice here. Okay, and it's a kind of natural environment. Okay, so the characters, along with the reader, right? Note the fact that the narrator addresses you, the reader, directly in a kind of second person pronoun. All right, emphasizing the reader's participation in the scene. That's something that you guys can definitely take note of. You can see that, right? That's a point of view kind of observation. are immersed in this kind of natural setting, right? Where the pine needles never stop flowing or sort of falling down. It's almost like it's raining. Okay, that they're 9,000 feet high, immersed up in or tucked away up in these mountains, and there's lakes dotting the landscape around them. And this suggests that the scene that follows is going to explore a kind of quintessentially natural development in a father and a son's relationship. Okay, so very similar to the natural setting that they are immersed in, this natural development is going to occur, one that signals the coming of age of the boy and some of the pains that accompany increased independence from one's parents, some of the anxiety that accompanies increased independence from their parents, right? You might be experiencing that as you kind of look forward to the next step in your life, right? What is that going to look like? It's anxiety inducing, but it's also kind of inexorable, right? You want it, but it's also a little bit anxiety inducing, right? Both for you and your parents. Okay. The details, right? Note the details. The fact that Trumbo goes out of his way to emphasize that they're 9,000 feet high, and that it's covered with pines, these tall pines, and these dotted with lakes. Okay, so it's a kind of relational precipice. All right, that is described by the natural setting. Again, something that I think you guys could see in this text if you're looking at it closely within the context of this larger relationship between the boy and his father. How do the details help develop that? Well, again, he emphasizes the sort of height, this sort of peak that they are at in their relationship, and also the kind of hidden depths of meaning that the simple exchange, right, the dotted lakes. Okay, the depths of this relationship that are kind of hidden and difficult to explore, all right, and is sort of disguised in this simple exchange. Yeah, here, take the rod, right? But that simple exchange has a kind of depth to it, okay? A kind of transcendence to it, a kind of deep meaning to it that both the boy and his father have a sense of, but don't fully articulate, okay? In the next paragraph, right, it's clear that the narrator has omniscient access to the boy's thoughts, all right, and his thought processes. Okay, and that helps clarify the conflicting emotions that he has with respect to this oncoming request or assertion that he's going to make to his dad that he wants to go fishing with his friend Bill Harper. Okay, no big deal, right? But again, a kind of hidden depth, a simple exchange, a simple request that is a kind of has a deeper significance for their relationship as son and father, and for the boys coming of age as a whole, and the boys sort of inability to fully articulate the significance of the interaction that is about to unfold is embodied by and reflected in the kind of vague language that the narrator uses to describe the boy's apprehension. All right, in other words, he has a sense that this is going to be a meaningful moment. All right, he has a sense that he is going to assert himself in a way that he hasn't up to this point in his life, but he's unable to sort of fully articulate and analyze exactly what this moment means. All right, which is again a very kind of human, especially very male experience. This sort of inability or unwillingness to fully articulate what's going on internally. Okay, and this is imitated, right? Notice the language, right? It was a very serious thing. Okay, it, a vague pronoun. What is it? Well, it, just the request, this thing. It was very serious, and it's just a thing, right? What is serious about it? What thing are we talking about here? The vague language helps embody or illustrate this kind of sense that the boy understands that it's important, but has a hard time articulating exactly why. Okay, he knew it was something that had to happen sometime. Yet he also knew it was the end of something. It was an ending and a beginning, right? So again, it, yet he knew it. It was something. It had to happen sometime. This repetition of this vague language, again helps emphasize that. All right, as the narrator has access to the boy's thought processes and helps embody the confusion of the boy as he tries to articulate this internally but can't fully come to grips with it. He only has sort of vague, abstract language to describe it. Okay. And in the next paragraph, paragraph 3, right? Let's read this paragraph quickly. So he told him very casually. He said, "Bill Harper's coming up tomorrow, and I thought maybe I'd go out with him." He said, "Bill Harper doesn't know very much about fishing, and I do. I think if you don't mind, I'll get up early in the morning and meet Harper, and he and I will go fishing." Okay. So first, I want you to note the syntactical structure and the pacing of this scene. Okay, so the first sentence of the paragraph after this sort of angst is pretty abrupt, right? So he told him very casually, right? It's almost rushed, right? The narrator's recounting of the conversation between the boy and his father, this significant moment in which the boy is asserting himself and also simultaneously kind of asking for his father's blessing, is sort of covered over with this seeming air of casuality. It's no big deal, right? It's brief, it's rushed. That's also indicated for us by the fact that the narrator doesn't allow the boy to actually say what he said, right? Which conventionally, whenever you get dialogue, how do you structure that in the paragraph? Well, each portion of the dialogue gets its own paragraph, and when a new speaker speaks, there's a kind of a new paragraph, and it helps you sort of meditate on the individuality of that comment, right, and that person's voice. Well, here, the structure of the passage kind of rushes through that. There is no break. There is no paragraph break. There is no paragraph structure here as the boy kind of rushes through this seemingly casual but obviously significant statement. Okay, and then I want you to notice the syntax of the statement itself. All right, so he said, "Bill Harper doesn't know very much about fishing, and I do." Okay, I think if you don't mind, I'll get up early in the morning and meet Harper, and he and I will go fishing. First of all, notice the lack of punctuation. All right, for all the sort of parenthetical elements like and I do. So I think if you don't mind, all of it is sort of jumbled together in this run-on sentence that isn't punctuated correctly. Again, emphasizing the kind of rushed, performed casualness of the boy's statement as he is attempting to sort of protect his father's feelings, protect his father's sense that he's not trying to be disloyal or unloving or disrespectful here. Okay, he's trying to sort of veil this in casualness. All right. And also notice that this is one part assertion. All right, on one level, the boy is being assertive. He's asserting himself like a man does. I think this is what I'm going to do. Right, I'm going to go and do this, and I know how to fish. Right, a kind of performance or a sign of his efficacy as a man within the context of his and his father's relationship. Okay, so every father and son have a different kind of relationship. You know, maybe fishing's not your thing, but there is some kind of sense, oftentimes in father and son relationships, of this shared sense of like masculine efficacy, like what you're good at and what you sort of share in. And the boy affirms, like, I'm good at this thing. Okay, I do. I know about fishing. So I think I'm going to go fishing with him. That's an assertion. That's a statement. That's not a question. But, all right, laden in the assertion is this air of a question. I think if you don't mind. Here, the boy is both asserting himself as a man, but in a distinctly sort of young or adolescent way as he is looking for what? His father's blessing, okay? And that is emphasized for us in the syntax here. And it's emphasized for us in the pacing here, all right? It's emphasized for us in the structure of this statement. Okay, so once again, right, we're talking about the function of structure. We're talking about the function of syntax and style. We're talking about the function of the way in which Trumbo uses all a manner of literary devices to illustrate a character's internality. Okay, this boy. Okay, so I don't want to spend too, I don't want to take too much of your time here. All right, so I'm going to allow you to analyze these paragraphs independently for yourself. Okay, we're not going to go too closely here, but I would like for you to notice the father's response. Right, the father, knowing that the boy is uncomfortable, knowing that the boy is asserting himself in a way that a young man ought to and is natural for a young man to do, but also not calling attention to this the gravity of this moment to so as to not embarrass the boy. Right? He says, "Oh yeah, it's no big deal. Right? Here, have the rod. Go ahead and take mine. Okay." Bill Harper can use yours and you can use mine. This is a kind of passing of a sort of symbol, right? A phallic object, right? A fishing rod, a sort of symbol of masculinity, a symbol of manhood that is passed on to his son. And he does so as if it was, quote, simple, right? The father seems to understand what the boy needs and the simplicity that the boy needs to be sort of treated with in this situation. But it ultimately betrays his understanding of the depth of the situation as he gives him this very significant, very valuable fishing rod. And this puts, okay, again, the scene ends with the boy sleeping, okay, and being awoken to a kind of new reality, right, where he's a man now, okay, and his he has asserted his distance from the care of his father and his own sort of self-reliance to a certain extent in the scene. Okay, so very elegant, all right, very simple kind of passage, great articulation, I think, of the dynamic between fathers and sons. Is something near and dear to my heart as I am about to have a son and also have a father that I have a wonderful relationship with. But ultimately, also, I think just a simple expression of the ways in which, uh, uh, starting with a clear understanding of what a passage intends to do, right? Starting with that interpretation, and then building an analysis. Notice that I just used a chronological analysis, just went paragraph by paragraph, using a chronological analysis of the details of the text to build a coherent understanding of the scene. Again, keys here: don't overcomplicate things, right? Just allow the text to say what it says, and don't make it say anything it doesn't say. All right, but don't let the details escape you, right? If there is something like a natural environment that is described in a certain level of detail, go ahead and think about what that would mean. Connect it to your thesis. Connect it to the dominant impression. It's there for a reason. It's your job to explain why. Okay, so it's kind of a balance between not over analyzing or pretending that the text means something that it doesn't, but also not under analyzing. Right? If there is a detail, unpack it. Right? Describe it. Tell me why it's there. Okay. And that ultimately, all of these interpretations should build to this unified experience, this unified interpretation of this relationship. All right, so that's what we have today. I just want to give you an example of that. A good practice to continue this process is looking at other prompts. Okay, you could look at the 2018 prompt. We've talked about this one before, but it functions in very much the same way. All right, it's all about analyzing how Hawthorne portrays a particular narrator, a character who is the first person narrator of this experience, his attitude towards Zenobia. Okay, so how does he feel toward her, right? What is his attitude toward her? Okay, so that's just another kind of interpretive prompt that requires you to unpack the layers of this person's character, right? How the narrator reveals his attitude towards this other individual, Zenobia. Okay. Another example you could unpack is the D.H. Lawrence prompt. Another example you could unpack is the Mayor of Casterbridge prompt. You can go one by one and look at all of these. But ultimately, it simply is the same action of discerning what the central impression is, right? And then analyzing how the author is using literary techniques to develop that impression in each aspect of the text, okay? So, why? Always ask yourself why the details structured the way they are. How does it relate to the dominant impression? Okay. If you can't answer that question, then either it's insignificant, all right, or you can't see it, and you probably should move on. Talk about stuff that you can understand. All right. Talk about the stuff that you can connect to a dominant impression that you've discerned. All right. Have a great day.